said, and this is what you're doing here today, power concedes nothing without its demand. Reclaim Labor Day. Make it a day for labor. Make it a day for remembering the folks who brought you the 8-hour day. Make it a day for people to come together and to show organized capital that they are not the masters of the universe, which is what you're doing here. And so let me quit talking, hand off to Joe, and then we'll have a bit of a discussion.
Good on you, brother. You said everything I was going to say, so I'll just pass the mic over. I think it's interesting that the ruling class in the Antipodes moved Labor Day from May Day to this day, so that a lot of the people who are essentially economic refugees from Europe, the working class of New Zealand, coming from England, coming from Wales, Scotland and Ireland, the poorest of the poor, driven out of slums, driven off the land, and coming here, and bringing their traditions of struggle that we had against the landowners and the landlords and the ruling class in our countries. And many of us making alliances with Maori, Irish, for example, refusing to fight in the land wars in the Waikato for a British Empire. But we took our traditions and struggle with us. And it's interesting that the state didn't give us a holiday here in May Day, right, and give it around this time. And I actually just want to reclaim this Labor Day in another kind of way, because I'm a bit of a Celtic pagan. Before the Christians came and colonized my land, we had our own religion based on the cycles of nature, much like Maori people do. And this day, the first day of summer, this is what I like to call this, the first day of our Aotearoa summer, is Beltane, back in the old Celtic days, which of course was a festival of love, of the fertility of the people generally having a good time. Leave that to your imagination. And I'm sure with the All Blacks victory there'll be a lot of children coming in 9 months' time. So that was the original history of May Day, which was a people's festival together to welcome the summer. But of course that struggle with the people's resistance, developed into St. Joseph's Day, the patron saint of labour, and then May Day with the organised industrial working class. So even though they've changed May Day to Labor Day and put in, nearly 6 months from where it should be, it actually fits. It actually works here if we do reclaim it, because this is the first day of our summer, and let's hope that this is a hot summer of industrial struggle, of workers and unions starting to stand up and fight John Key, fight the government, fight this economic system that we need to fight. So, if we look at the origins, of the trade union movement here in New Zealand, you see, there's two souls in the unions, right? In every country, there's two souls in the unions, right? I'll tell you the first one. The first one is a bunch of privileged bureaucrats who collect the dues from their members, who give funding to one of the big political parties in this country. I'll leave that up to your imagination, right? And who actually do tackle.
Is it Labour?
I'll leave that up to your imagination. And who actually do bugger all, right, for the working people of this country. This party might have been in government for 9 years, I think, before the other party was in government. And yet, the second soul of the trade union movement, the one that wants to fight, it had a campaign to get rid of youth rates under a Labour government. It had a campaign to get the minimum wage up from $9 to $12. There's two souls in the trade union movement, and when we remember the beginning of the trade union movement here in New Zealand, it was led by revolutionaries. It was led by socialists. It was led by anarchists. It was led by wobblies of the international workers of the world. And, this is the spirit that we need to reclaim. The unions have become far too comfortable, and they're dying a death, right? They're dying a death when they refuse to organize and refuse to fight. Contrast that with the spirit that we're seeing in Occupy Wall Street, where 25,000 workers in New York have joined the unions affiliated to the AFL-CIO in the last 2 weeks. Why are young workers, why are immigrant workers, why are poor people joining unions again in New York? And I'll tell you why. Because they see the unions come down and support the Occupy Wall Street. That's what we need to start seeing here with Occupy Out here. And that means our movement needs to start to reach out to working people. And we need to start coming up with some concrete ideas, concrete demands that make sense to people out there, right? We've got 170,000 workers in New Zealand without a job. We've got 200,000 of our children living in extreme poverty. We've got 500,000 workers earning less than $15 an hour. And all of that is happening when the 151 richest people in this country, that 1%, who will all be up there next Sunday at the National Party Conference in Sky City, they got an extra $7 billion extra last year in profits. If we took that money off them, and one day we will, everybody in New Zealand would have a job. Nobody would need to fly on an airplane to Melbourne or Sydney and leave their family behind them. We could have $40 an hour minimum wage, and we would abolish Monday. Now, all great-grandparents had that spirit. The workers had nothing. Nothing was given to us. We didn't have a weekend. We didn't have an 8-hour day. We didn't have health and safety. We didn't even have the vote. But our great-grandparents stood up on their feet and they fought back against the 1%. And they achieved many of the things that we take for granted. It's time we reclaim the spirit of Labour Day and started a fight like our great-grandparents did, like our grandparents did, and like our parents did. And that means building a better New Zealand, but reaching out through the biggest democratic organisations we have, which is the Labour movement in New Zealand. 400,000 workers are organised by the unions in New Zealand, and this is our army. If we want to change the world, how big is your army? Well, there you go, 400,000 people. I think our movement needs to start saying things like this. We need a living wage for everybody in New Zealand. People can't survive on $13 an hour. I organised the KFCs and McDonald's out in South Auckland. And I'll tell you for a fact, there's mothers and grandmothers trying to feed their families on $13 an hour. And that's not what they work. Because the other crime that people have is underemployment. People are desperate to get 40 hours a week work. That's actually something that's been lost for those in precarious employment. People have their hours changed from week to week. 25 hours, 32 hours, 18 hours. Talk to the security guards who work in this square, who are on contract labour. Right? We need to start demanding things like a 40-hour week with secure hours, like a living wage for every worker in New Zealand, like the abolition of unfair taxes that hurt poor people, like GST. Let's abolish GST and let's tax the rich, tax the banks. If we start making demands like that, and if we start to put the demands up here on the wall, I'll tell you what, the 100,000 people who just went to see the All Blacks will see those demands and go, do you know what? This Occupy movement is making sense. Because it's talking about the big ideas that we don't get from the Pepsi or the Coca-Cola political parties in the Parliament. And it's also talking about real needs of people in New Zealand who are suffering on Struggle Street. That's the spirit of Labour Day. That's the spirit of the original revolutionaries who set up the unions in New Zealand. And that's what we're going to need in the next few weeks for this movement to grow and go from the 500 people who've been part of it into 5,000, 50,000, or 500,000. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have a General Assembly at 4:30. So